They called her desperate. A woman scorned, humiliated before London society by the man who had promised her everything. But what no one knew was far worse than gossip. Annette Carter had until Christmas to find a husband, or her father's debts would force her into the arms of a man she feared. Then, on a winter night thick with shame and snow, she met him. A duke, a widower, a man as broken as she was, and what began as a performance for the world became something neither of them could control. What happens when two wounded hearts pretend to love, only to discover the pretense was never pretense at all? The winter of 1895 descended upon London with unusual cruelty. Snow fell in thick curtains over cobblestone streets, and the wind carried whispers colder than the frost clinging to window panes. Inside the grand Wentworth residence, crystal chandeliers cast warm light over silk gowns and tailored evening coats, but Annette Carter felt none of that warmth. She stood near the fireplace. Her gloved hands clasped so tightly her knuckles ached, forcing herself to smile as conversations swirled around her like vultures circling prey. She was 24 years old, unmarried, and ruined. Not in the scandalous sense that required exile to the countryside, but in the quieter, more vicious way that London society preferred. 3 months ago, Charles Miller had broken their engagement. Not for lack of affection, he had claimed. Not due to any fault of hers, simply because he had fallen desperately in love with Lydia Pemberton, who happened to be Annette's closest friend since childhood, former friend. The humiliation still burned like a brand against her chest. But what kept Annette awake at night, what made her pulse quicken with panic even now, was something far worse than social disgrace. Her father, Edmund Carter, a merchant with noble lineage and catastrophic debts, had signed an agreement she discovered only after Charles abandoned her. If she remained unmarried by Christmas Day, she would become the wife of Theodore Harrow. Harrow. The name alone made her stomach turn. A wealthy industrialist in his 50s with a reputation for cruelty toward his workers and his first 2 wives, both of whom had died under mysterious circumstances. But he wanted a young bride from good family to cement his place in society. And her father's desperation had delivered her into his hands like a transaction of livestock. She had 5 weeks. 5 weeks to find a respectable husband, or her life would end before it truly began. Across the drawing room, Charles laughed at something Lydia whispered in his ear. They stood beneath a garland of winter greenery, her hand possessive on his arm, her diamond engagement ring catching the light with obscene brightness. Lydia glanced toward Annette, and for just a moment, their eyes met. Annette saw neither apology nor triumph there, only indifference, as if their years of friendship had never existed at all. That hurt worse than the betrayal itself. Lady Wentworth swept past with several matrons in tow, their voices pitched just loud enough for Annette to hear. Poor dear, such a shame. One cannot blame Mr. Miller entirely. After all, when love calls. The words landed like stones. Annette kept her expression serene, sipped champagne she did not taste, and wished she could disappear into the wallpaper. The room grew too hot, too loud, too suffocating. She needed air. She needed to breathe without the weight of pitying stares pressing down on her shoulders. Setting her glass on a passing tray, Annette slipped through the crowd toward the terrace doors. No one seemed to notice her departure. Why would they? She was already a ghost at her own life's funeral. The cold hit her like a slap when she stepped outside. Snow fell in lazy spirals, settling on the stone balustrade and the bare branches of the garden below. Annette closed her eyes and drew in a lungful of frozen air, letting it burn down her throat and into her chest. Out here, she could pretend she was someone else, someone whose future was not a noose tightening day by day. She was not alone. A man stood at the far end of the terrace, half hidden in shadow near one of the stone pillars, tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in impeccable black evening wear. He held a glass of whiskey loosely in one hand and stared out at the snow-covered garden as if he could see through it to something beyond. His profile was sharp, aristocratic, etched with a severity that suggested he smiled rarely, if ever. Annette recognized him, though they had never been properly introduced. Herbert Langford, Duke of Ravenshire, 32 years old, widower, recluse. She knew the story everyone knew. His wife had died in childbirth 4 years ago, along with their son. Since then, he appeared in London only when family obligations demanded it, spending most of his time at his estate in the north. People said he had loved his wife with the kind of devotion poets wrote about. People said he would never love again. He turned his head slightly, and his gaze found hers. Dark eyes, unreadable. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The snow fell between them, the sounds of the party muffled by the closed doors. Then he inclined his head, a gesture that was not quite a bow but held a trace of acknowledgement. "Miss Carter, I presume." His voice was low, rough-edged, as if he did not use it often. Annette returned the gesture with a small curtsy. "Your Grace." "Escaping the circus as well?" She almost smiled. "Something like that." Herbert took a slow drink from his glass, his attention returning to the garden. "I find these gatherings increasingly unbearable, all that chatter about nothing. All those people performing happiness they do not feel." His honesty surprised her. Most men of his rank hid behind pleasant formalities. Annette moved a few steps closer, her slippers soundless on the snow-dusted stone. "And yet you came tonight. Family insists. They believe a man in mourning should eventually rejoin the living." He said the last word with faint distaste, as if the living were something unfortunate one stepped in by accident. Annette understood that feeling more than she cared to admit. "And do you believe that?" He was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he turned to face her fully, and she saw something in his expression that stole her breath. Not pity, not curiosity, recognition. "I believe the living are far too interested in matters that do not concern them." He gestured with his glass toward the drawing room behind them, where the party continued without them. "They speak of loss and heartbreak as if they understand either. But grief is not a topic for gossip. It is a companion one learns to live with, or it destroys you entirely." Annette felt tears prick at her eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. She blinked them back. "You speak as if there is no middle ground." His gaze held hers, steady and unflinching. "Is there?" She did not know how to answer that. All her life she had been taught to smile through pain, to present a pleasing exterior, regardless of what roiled beneath. But standing here in the cold with this grim, honest stranger, she felt the mask slip. "I do not know," she admitted quietly. "I thought I knew what my life would be, and then it all fell apart, and now I must smile while people discuss my humiliation as if it were theater for their amusement." Herbert's expression softened, just slightly. "The man who broke your engagement." It was not a question. Of course he had heard, everyone had heard. Annette nodded. "He fell in love with my dearest friend. I am told I should be gracious about it. That matters of the heart cannot be helped." "And are you gracious?" She met his eyes and told him the truth. "No, I am furious and terrified, and so very tired of pretending otherwise." The wind gusted, sending snow swirling around them both. Herbert did not look away. "Good. Fury is honest. Terror is real. Pretending only makes the weight heavier." Something shifted in that moment. A connection neither of them had expected, forged in shared pain and the strange intimacy of strangers who have nothing left to lose. Annette felt it settle into her bones, warm despite the cold. They stood together in silence as the snow continued to fall, two broken people sharing the same bitter night, unaware that this meeting would unravel everything they thought they knew about survival, about protection, about the cost of letting someone see the wounds they carried. Inside, the party laughed and danced. Outside, two hearts began, without knowing it, the slow and dangerous work of healing. 3 days after the Wentworth gathering, Annette found herself at yet another social obligation. This time, a winter luncheon at the Ashworth estate, where ladies gathered under the pretense of charity work while actually dissecting the latest scandals over tea and finger sandwiches. She attended only because her mother insisted that hiding would make the gossip worse. The afternoon dragged with excruciating slowness. Annette sat near a window, embroidering a handkerchief she would never finish, half listening to discussions about the upcoming Christmas season. Her mind kept returning to that night on the terrace, to the unexpected conversation with the Duke of Ravensshire. There had been something in his eyes, a recognition of shared suffering that made her feel less alone for the first time in months. She did not expect to see him again so soon. But when the butler announced the arrival of several gentlemen joining for tea, Herbert Langford walked into the drawing room with the same severe expression she remembered. His presence commanded immediate attention. Conversations stuttered and died as every woman turned to stare at the reclusive Duke who rarely attended such gatherings. His gaze swept the room and found Annette almost instantly. Something flickered in those dark eyes. Not quite a smile, but an acknowledgement. Lady Ashworth fluttered toward him with the determination of a general planning an invasion. "Your Grace, what an unexpected pleasure. We are honored by your presence." Herbert inclined his head politely. "Lady Ashworth, I hope I am not intruding." "Not at all, not at all. Please do join us." She gestured broadly toward the assembled ladies, clearly hoping he would circulate and provide fresh material for gossip. "We were just discussing the upcoming Christmas festivities." Herbert's attention, however, remained fixed on Annette. "Miss Carter," he said, his voice cutting through the sudden silence, "might I have a word? In private, if your chaperone permits." Every eye in the room turned to Annette. She felt heat climb her neck, but she kept her composure. Her mother, seated across the room, gave a small nod of permission. "Of course, Your Grace." They stepped into an adjoining library, the door left appropriately ajar. Through the gap, Annette could see several ladies craning their necks, desperate to overhear. Herbert seemed oblivious to the attention, or perhaps simply indifferent. He stood near a bookshelf, one hand resting on a leather-bound volume, and studied her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. "I have been thinking about our conversation," he said without preamble, "about what you said regarding pretense and performance." Annette clasped her hands together. "As have I. I have heard the rumors about your former engagement, about the manner in which it ended." His directness should have offended her, but instead it felt like relief. No dancing around the truth, no false sympathy. She lifted her chin. "Then you know I am considered damaged goods, a woman scorned, pitied and whispered about in equal measure. I also know something of public scrutiny." Herbert moved closer, close enough that she could see the fine lines at the corners of his eyes, evidence of grief carried too long. "Since my wife's death, I have been hounded by matchmaking mothers and well-meaning relatives who believe I should remarry, that I should move on, as they say, and you do not wish to?" His jaw tightened. "I have no interest in marriage, not now, perhaps not ever, but the pressure is relentless. Every social gathering becomes a gauntlet of hopeful debutantes and their ambitious families." Annette understood where this was leading before he spoke the words. Her heart began to beat faster, a wild hope and terror tangling together in her chest. "Which brings me to a proposition," Herbert continued, "one that might benefit us both." She waited, barely breathing. "I propose we engage in a public courtship. False, of course, but convincing enough to satisfy society's demands." He spoke as if discussing a business arrangement, clinical and precise. "For me, it would provide a shield against unwanted attention. For you, it would silence the gossip and restore your standing. We would attend events together through the Christmas season, appear properly enamored and then part amicably after the New Year." The offer hung between them, both lifeline and lie. Annette's mind raced. This could work. If she appeared to be courted by a duke, Charles and Lydia's betrayal would seem insignificant. The whispers would transform from pity to envy. And most importantly, if she could convince Harrow that she was spoken for, that a duke had claimed her, perhaps her father could break the agreement without financial ruin. But there was risk. If anyone discovered the deception, the scandal would destroy what little remained of her reputation. And there was another danger, one she barely acknowledged even to herself. The way Herbert looked at her, the quiet understanding in his voice, the shared pain that connected them. This arrangement might be false, but the feelings it could awaken might not be. What would the terms be, she asked, surprised by the steadiness in her voice. Herbert stepped closer still. We would be honest with each other in private. No pretense between us, only when others are watching. We would attend social functions together, behave as a couple forming an attachment. And when the season ends, we part as friends, with our respective freedoms intact. And if one of us wishes to end it sooner, then it ends. No questions, no obligations beyond basic courtesy. Annette studied his face, searching for any sign of ulterior motive. She found only exhaustion and a desperate need to be left alone by a world that would not allow it. She understood that need intimately. There is one thing you should know, she said carefully, weighing each word. My situation is more complicated than mere gossip. There are circumstances that make a public courtship particularly valuable to me. Circumstances I am not at liberty to discuss. Something shifted in Herbert's expression. Wariness, perhaps, or recognition that they both carried secrets heavier than social embarrassment. He did not press for details, and she felt gratitude for that restraint. We all have our private burdens, Miss Carter. I am proposing a solution to a public problem. What drives your acceptance is your concern, not mine. The arrangement was mercenary, calculated, and deeply dishonest. It was also the best chance Annette had to avoid marriage to Theodore Harrow without destroying her father entirely. She thought of those cold eyes, that cruel mouth, the rumors of what happened behind closed doors in his household. She extended her hand. I accept your proposal, Your Grace. Herbert took her hand, his grip firm and warm even through their gloves. Then we have an accord. He held her gaze for a moment longer than necessary, and Annette felt something dangerous flutter in her chest. Shall we return to the drawing room and begin our performance? They walked back together, and the moment they entered, the room erupted in barely suppressed excitement. Herbert guided her to a settee with the solicitousness of an attentive suitor. He sat beside her, closer than propriety strictly allowed, and engaged her in conversation about literature and travel, while every woman present watched with undisguised fascination. Annette played her part perfectly, laughing at his dry observations, leaning slightly toward him, allowing her eyes to linger on his face. It should have felt false, calculated. Instead, it felt frighteningly natural. When they finally took their leave, Herbert offered to escort Annette and her mother home in his carriage. As they rode through the snowy streets, Annette stared out the window and wondered what she had just set in motion. Beside her, Herbert sat in silence, his expression unreadable, but his hand rested on the seat between them, fingers spread as if reaching for something just out of grasp. Neither of them realized that what had begun as performance was already becoming something far more dangerous, something neither calculation nor caution could contain. The following week transformed Annette's life in ways she had not anticipated. Herbert began calling at the Carter residence with a regularity that sent the household into frenzied preparation each time his carriage appeared on their street. The servants polished silver that already gleamed, her mother fretted over tea service, and her father observed the proceedings with an expression caught between relief and suspicion. Edmund Carter was no fool. He recognized an opportunity when it presented itself, but he also recognized that dukes did not typically court merchants' daughters, no matter how respectable their lineage. Still, he asked no uncomfortable questions, perhaps because he feared the answers. On the third visit, Annette found herself alone with Herbert in the drawing room, her mother stationed in the adjoining parlor, as propriety demanded. The door remained open, but the angle afforded them a measure of privacy. Herbert sat across from her, a cup of tea balanced on his knee, looking distinctly uncomfortable with the delicate china. We should coordinate our appearances, he said, all business. The Ashworth Winter Ball is in 10 days. The Wentworth Christmas soiree follows 3 days later, and my cousin is hosting a New Year celebration that would serve our purposes well. Annette retrieved a small calendar from the writing desk. Let me note these down. She moved to sit beside him on the settee, close enough to share the calendar between them. As she leaned forward to write, her shoulder brushed his arm. Neither of them pulled away. The Winter Ball will be our most public appearance, Herbert continued, his voice slightly rougher than before. Society will be watching closely. We should arrive together, dance at least twice, and appear thoroughly enamored. Thoroughly enamored. Annette tested the words, found them both terrifying and thrilling. And between these events, should we maintain contact? Herbert glanced toward the parlor where her mother sat pretending to read. If we are seen together regularly, the courtship appears more genuine. Perhaps I could call on you several afternoons each week. We could take walks when weather permits, attend the theater, a schedule of false affection, planned like military maneuvers. Yet as Herbert spoke, his gaze kept drifting to her face, lingering on details a man engaged in pure performance would not notice, the curve of her jaw, the way afternoon light caught in her dark hair, the small crease that formed between her brows when she concentrated on writing. "May I ask you something?" Annette set down her pen and turned to face him fully. "Why did you really approach me with this arrangement? There must be other women who could serve the same purpose." Herbert was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tightening around his teacup. "Because that night on the terrace, you were the first person in 4 years to speak to me as if I were still human. Not a tragic figure to be pitied, not a title to be pursued, just a man tired of performing grief for an audience." The honesty in his words struck her like a physical blow. "And you saw the same in me," she said softly. "Someone exhausted by pretense." "Yes." The single word carried the weight of a confession. They sat in silence, the space between them charged with understanding that ran deeper than their calculated arrangement. From the parlor came the soft sound of pages turning, a reminder that they were not truly alone. "Tell me about your estate," Annette said, deliberately shifting to safer ground. "You mentioned spending most of your time in the north." Herbert's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Ravenshire is isolated. The nearest town is 6 miles away. The land is harsh, the winters brutal. Most people find it unbearably bleak. But you do not? I find it honest. The wind does not pretend to be gentle. The cold does not apologize for existing. There are no expectations there beyond survival and hard work." Annette smiled despite herself. "You make it sound rather appealing." "Do I?" Herbert seemed genuinely surprised. Most women would consider it a prison. Perhaps most women have never felt imprisoned by comfort and expectation. She met his eyes, saw recognition flare there again. Sometimes isolation is freedom. Herbert studied her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are not what I expected, Miss Carter. And what did you expect? Someone desperate enough to agree to this arrangement without asking questions. Someone easily managed and dismissed when the time came." Annette raised an eyebrow. "I am beginning to suspect you chose very poorly for that purpose, Your Grace." His mouth curved in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "Indeed I did." The visits continued throughout the week, each one lasting longer than the last. Herbert brought books from his library, surprising Annette with volumes on philosophy and history that ladies were rarely offered. They discussed everything from politics to poetry, discovering shared opinions on suffrage and social reform that would scandalize their peers. During one particularly animated debate about land management, Herbert leaned back and observed, "You should have been permitted an education beyond music and watercolors." Annette felt warmth spread through her chest at the casual acknowledgement of her intelligence. "My father believes educated women make difficult wives. And what do you believe?" "I believe difficult wives are the ones worth knowing." Herbert laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his entire face. The severity disappeared, replaced by something younger, lighter, almost joyful. Annette stared at him, transfixed by the change. "What?" he asked, catching her expression. "Nothing. It is only that I have never heard you laugh before." The lightness faded as quickly as it had appeared, shuttered behind familiar walls. "I do not laugh often. You should. It suits you." Herbert looked away, but not before she saw something vulnerable flash across his features, in a different life perhaps. The words hung heavy with implication. Annette wanted to press further, to ask about his wife, about the child who never drew breath, about the grief that carved lines into his face. But she understood instinctively that some doors opened only when ready, and forcing them caused damage beyond repair. Instead, She reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the arm of the settee. Just a brief contact, her fingers barely grazing his knuckles, but the effect was electric. Herbert's breath hitched audibly. His eyes found hers, dark and startled and hungry, in a way that had nothing to do with their arrangement. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for these afternoons. For treating me as if I have thoughts worth hearing." Herbert turned his hand palm up beneath hers, a gesture that felt monumental in its intimacy. "The pleasure is mine, Miss Carter. More than you know." From the parlor, her mother cleared her throat meaningfully. The spell broke. Annette withdrew her hand, Herbert straightened his posture, and they returned to discussing the weather with forced casualness. But when Herbert took his leave an hour later, he held Annette's gaze a moment too long as he bowed over her hand. Something had shifted between them, some invisible line crossed that neither had intended to breach. As his carriage disappeared down the street, Annette pressed her palm to her chest and felt her heart racing beneath her corset. This was supposed to be an arrangement, a temporary solution to separate problems. But somewhere between calculated visits and honest conversations, between shared books and unexpected laughter, she had begun to look forward to seeing him with an eagerness that had nothing to do with social salvation. And that, she realized with dawning terror, was the most dangerous thing of all. Behind her, her father emerged from his study. "The Duke seems quite taken with you," he observed, his voice carefully neutral. Annette forced herself to smile. "We enjoy each other's company." "Say that you do not lose this opportunity, Annette. Our family's future may well depend upon it." The words struck like ice water. Her father knew nothing of their arrangement, nothing of the performance they staged. He saw only what they wanted him to see. A duke courting his daughter, a potential marriage that could erase debts and restore honor. But what Annette saw, what kept her awake that night staring at her ceiling, was Herbert's face when he laughed. The way his eyes softened when he looked at her, the warmth of his hand beneath hers. She was falling, and there would be no soft landing when the arrangement ended. The Ashworth winter ball arrived with the fanfare of fresh snowfall and the glitter of 1,000 candles reflected in crystal. Annette stood before her mirror as her lady's maid fastened the last button on a gown of deep sapphire silk that brought out the blue in her eyes. The dress was daring by her usual standards, the neckline lower, the waist more defined, the fabric chosen specifically to make an impression. Tonight she would be seen on the arm of a duke. Tonight the whispers would change from pity to envy. But beneath the calculated performance, her hands trembled as she fastened her mother's pearls around her throat. In the past week, something had shifted between her and Herbert. The easy conversations, the shared laughter, the way he looked at her when he thought she was not watching. It felt real in a way that terrified her. The carriage ride to the Ashworth estate passed in tense silence. Her parents sat across from her, her mother radiating approval, her father wearing an expression of grim hope. They saw salvation in Herbert's courtship. They could not know it was built on lies. When they arrived, Herbert was waiting in the entrance hall. He wore formal evening dress, black tailcoat and white waistcoat, his cravat tied with mathematical precision, but it was his face that stole her breath. He looked at her the way a starving man might look at a feast, with an intensity that had nothing to do with performance. "Miss Carter," he bowed over her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles in a gesture too intimate to be accidental. "You are breathtaking." The words were meant for the watching crowd, but the roughness in his voice was real. Annette felt heat climb her neck. "Your Grace, you are too kind. I am only honest." He offered his arm and she took it, acutely aware of the hard muscle beneath expensive fabric, of the warmth radiating through the layers of clothing. As they entered the ballroom together, conversation dimmed like candles snuffed by wind. Every head turned. Charles and Lydia stood near the refreshment table, both frozen in place, their expressions identical masks of shock. Lady Ashworth descended upon them with the speed of a woman sensing gossip in the making. "Duke Ravenshire and Miss Carter. What a stunning couple you make." Her eyes gleamed with speculation. "I dare say we shall be hearing happy news before long." Herbert's hand tightened fractionally on Annette's arm. "We are simply enjoying each other's company, Lady Ashworth." Though I confess, enjoyment seems inadequate to describe the pleasure Miss Carter brings me. The calculated compliment sent ripples through the nearby guests. Annette felt dozens of eyes assessing her with new calculation. She was no longer the pitied woman scorned. She was the woman who had captured the attention of London's most elusive duke. The orchestra began tuning their instruments. Herbert leaned close, his breath warm against her ear. The first waltz is ours. Are you prepared for this? Annette met his eyes and saw her own fear reflected there. The waltz was still considered scandalous in conservative circles, requiring partners to hold each other closer than any other dance. It would cement their courtship in the minds of everyone present. I am, she whispered. Herbert led her to the center of the floor as other couples assembled around them. His right hand settled at her waist, firm and possessive. Her left hand rested on his shoulder. They clasped hands, and the contact sent electricity racing up her arm. The music began. Herbert moved with surprising grace for such a large man, guiding her through the steps with confidence that made following effortless. They swept across the polished floor, the room blurring around them until there was only the music, the movement, and the man who held her as if she were something precious. You dance beautifully, Herbert murmured, his eyes never leaving her face. As do you. I did not expect it. There is much about me you do not yet know. The words held promise and warning in equal measure. Annette felt the heat of his palm through the silk at her waist, felt the strength in the hand that held hers. This close, she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could smell sandalwood and something uniquely him. Herbert pulled her slightly closer, beyond what was strictly proper. His thumb traced small circles against her waist, the touch so subtle she might have imagined it, except for the way her body responded, every nerve ending suddenly awake and demanding. I want them to see, he said, his voice dropping lower. I want everyone in this room to know that you are not diminished by what that fool did to you, that you are remarkable, and any man would be honored to stand beside you. The words were meant for their arrangement, meant to serve their purpose. But the intensity in his eyes told a different story. This was not performance. This was something raw and real and completely unplanned. Herbert, she breathed, forgetting titles and propriety. The music swelled around them, and she felt herself falling into those dark eyes, into the warmth of his embrace, into feelings she had promised herself she would not allow. His hand tightened at her waist. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered there. For one breathless moment, she thought he might kiss her right there on the dance floor in front of everyone. She thought she might let him. Then the waltz ended. The spell broke. Applause rippled through the ballroom, and they separated the proper distance apart. But Herbert kept her hand in his fingers interlaced with hers in a way that suggested possession rather than courtesy. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and carefully choreographed interactions. Herbert remained at her side, attentive and protective. When Charles approached, clearly working up the courage to speak to her, Herbert's expression turned glacial in a way that sent the younger man retreating without a word. As the night wore on, Annette found herself on the terrace again, Herbert beside her as snow fell in the darkness beyond the warm glow of the ballroom. They stood close together, sharing warmth against the cold. Tonight did not feel like pretending, Annette admitted, the words escaping before she could stop them. Herbert was silent for a long moment. No, it did not. She turned to face him, searching his expression. What does that mean for us? For our arrangement? His jaw tightened. He reached up, almost touching her cheek before letting his hand fall. It means nothing must change. Our agreement was clear, Miss Carter. This ends after the new year. You will be free to pursue whatever future you choose, unburdened by obligation to me. The words felt like rejection despite their careful neutrality. Annette struggled to keep her voice steady. Of course. You have been more than generous with your time and attention. I would not dream of imposing beyond our agreed terms. Something pained crossed Herbert's face. Annette, But whatever he meant to say was interrupted by her mother calling from the doorway, reminding them of propriety and late hours. The moment shattered like glass. During the carriage ride home, Annette stared out at the snow-covered streets, and felt tears burn behind her eyes. Herbert had given her exactly what she asked for: a public courtship to restore her standing, protection from gossip and shame. He had never promised more. But somewhere between calculated visits and that waltz, she had committed the ultimate foolishness. She had fallen in love with him, completely, irrevocably, hopelessly, and in 3 weeks, when their arrangement ended, she would have to smile and let him walk away. She would have to marry Theodore Harrow unless a miracle occurred, and the only miracle she wanted was the one thing Herbert had made clear he could not give her: his heart. That night, Annette lay awake watching moonlight paint silver patterns on her ceiling, her body still remembering the warmth of Herbert's hand at her waist, her heart breaking for a future that would never be. In his own bed across the city, Herbert stared into darkness and fought against the truth he could no longer deny. He was falling in love with Annette Carter, and that terrified him more than any ballroom, any gossip, any pressure from family ever could, because love meant vulnerability. Love meant risk. Love meant possibly losing someone again the way he had lost everything before, and he did not know if he was strong enough to survive that pain a second time. The week following the Ashworth ball became a series of moments that felt stolen from time itself. Herbert and Annette attended the theatre on Tuesday evening, sitting in his private box where shadows and velvet curtains offered intimacy despite the crowd below. When the lead actor delivered a melodramatic death scene with unnecessary flourish, Herbert leaned close to her ear. "I have seen more convincing performances from my stable master after too much brandy." Annette pressed her gloved hand to her mouth, shoulders shaking with suppressed laughter. The couple in the adjacent box turned to stare, clearly scandalized that anyone would find humor during such a tragic moment. Herbert caught her eye and raised one eyebrow, which only made it worse. By the time intermission arrived, Annette's sides ached and her cheeks hurt from smiling. "You are terrible," she accused him as they stood in the corridor, accepting champagne from a passing waiter. "I am honest. There is a difference." Herbert's eyes crinkled at the corners, something she was beginning to recognize as his version of genuine amusement. "Besides, your laughter is worth any amount of disapproval from strangers." The compliment landed with unexpected weight. Annette looked up at him, seeing past the severe exterior to the man beneath who had forgotten how to find joy until recently. Until her. On Thursday, they attended a small soiree at the Wentworth residence. Charles and Lydia were notably absent, having apparently decided that discretion was wiser than confrontation. But the other guests watched Herbert and Annette with undisguised fascination, whispering behind fans and gloved hands. Herbert seemed oblivious to the attention. He stayed at Annette's side throughout the evening, his hand occasionally finding the small of her back, in a gesture that appeared protective but felt possessive. When an elderly marquess cornered her with tedious conversation about his hunting dogs, Herbert rescued her with smooth efficiency, guiding her toward the refreshment table with an apologetic smile that fooled no one. "You did not have to save me," Annette said, though secretly grateful. "Yes, I did." Another moment of hearing about his prizehound's digestive troubles, and I would have been forced to commit a social catastrophe. Such as... Herbert's expression turned wicked, honestly telling him that no one cares about his dog's bowel movements. Annette choked on her lemonade. Herbert patted her back with exaggerated concern, but his eyes danced with mischief. Several matrons gasped at the impropriety of him touching her so familiarly in public. They arrived at the refreshment table, and Herbert procured a small plate of delicacies. He selected a chocolate truffle and held it out to her. Their fingers brushed as she took it, and the simple contact sent warmth coursing through her veins. The afternoons were even more dangerous. Herbert began visiting the Carter residence almost daily, and the drawing room became their sanctuary. He brought books from his extensive library, first editions and rare volumes that he placed in her hands, as if offering treasures. One rainy afternoon, they sat together on the settee, a volume of Wordsworth open between them. Annette read aloud while Herbert listened, his eyes closed, his expression peaceful in a way she had never seen before. "You have a beautiful voice," he said when she paused. "When I am at Ravenshire, I think I shall hear you reading in the empty rooms." The words were casual, but they carried an ache that made Annette's throat tighten. After the new year, he would return to his isolated estate, and she would remain in London to face whatever future her father's debts had purchased for her. The arrangement would end. They would part ways. Unless she told him the truth about Harrow, unless she asked for more than their agreement promised. But fear kept her silent. Fear that he would feel obligated rather than choose her freely. Fear that she would become another burden he carried out of duty rather than desire. "Tell me something," Herbert said, opening his eyes and turning to face her fully. "If you could live anywhere, do anything, what would you choose?" The question surprised her. Annette set down the book and considered. "I would travel, not as a tourist on a grand tour, but really travel. I would learn languages, study different cultures, write about what I discovered." Her voice grew passionate as the fantasy took shape. "I would attend university lectures, debate with scholars, maybe even publish papers under a pen name since women are not taken seriously in academic circles." Herbert watched her with an expression she could not decipher. "And marriage? Children? The traditional expectations?" Annette met his gaze directly. "I want those things too, but I want them with someone who sees me as a partner, not a possession. Someone who encourages my mind as well as appreciating my appearance. Someone who would not be threatened by a wife with opinions and ambitions. Someone like me," Herbert said quietly. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Annette's heart hammered against her ribs. "Is that what you're saying?" Herbert reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. His thumb traced the line of her jaw with a tenderness that made her breath catch. "I'm saying that you deserve everything you just described, and more, but not with you." She forced herself to say it, to name the thing they were both avoiding. His hand fell away. His expression shuttered closed. "Annette, I cannot offer you what you deserve. I am broken in ways that do not heal. The best I can give you is this temporary reprieve, this handful of weeks where you can remember what it feels like to be valued." The rejection stung, even though she had known it was coming. "You are hiding," she said, anger sparking through her hurt. "You hide behind your grief, behind your isolation, behind these walls you have built. You accuse me of wearing masks, but yours is thicker than mine ever was." Herbert stood abruptly, pacing to the window. His shoulders were rigid, his hands clenched at his sides. "You do not understand what you are asking, then explain it to me." Annette rose and crossed to him, refusing to let him retreat. "Tell me why a man who laughs at terrible theatre and rescues me from boring marquises and reads poetry with such tenderness cannot imagine a future beyond loneliness." He spun to face her, and the anguish in his eyes nearly broke her. "Because everyone I love dies. Annette, my wife, my child. And I cannot survive losing someone again, do you understand? I cannot. So you choose to live half a life? To deny yourself any possibility of happiness because it might end in pain? Better half a life than no life at all, which is what I would be if I lost you too." The confession hung in the air between them, raw and devastating. Annette's anger evaporated, replaced by understanding and a love so fierce it frightened her. She stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body, close enough to see the war raging behind his eyes. "Herbert." Her voice was barely a whisper. "I am already here. You are already losing me when our arrangement ends. The only question is whether we waste these weeks protecting ourselves or whether we choose to feel everything while we can." His breathing had gone ragged. His hands lifted as if to touch her, then fell. "You are dangerous, Miss Carter. As are you, Your Grace." They stood there, suspended in a moment that could tip either direction. From the parlor came the sound of her mother's footsteps, the reminder of propriety and watching eyes. The moment shattered. Herbert stepped back, composure sliding into place like armor. "I should go." He bowed formally, the intimacy of seconds before vanishing behind practiced manners. "Until tomorrow." Annette watched him leave, her body trembling with unspent emotion. That night, she lay awake and admitted the truth to herself. She was not falling in love with Herbert. She had already fallen, completely and irrevocably. And whether he admitted it or not, he felt the same. The question was whether either of them would be brave enough to choose that love before time ran out, because in 2 weeks, Christmas would arrive. And with it, Theodore Harrow's claim on her future. If you are enjoying this story of two broken hearts finding their way back to hope, I would be so grateful if you would subscribe to the channel. And tell me, what would you do in Annette's place? Would you reveal your desperate secret to the Duke, risking everything? Or would you guard your heart and face your fate alone? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your words and presence here mean more than you know. The days following their confrontation in the drawing room brought a shift in Herbert's behavior that left Annette confused and aching. He still called at the prescribed times, still escorted her to social functions, still played the role of attentive suitor with flawless precision. But the warmth had vanished, replaced by a courtesy so polite it felt like ice. At the Pemberton musical on Saturday evening, he stood beside her with his hands clasped behind his back, maintaining a proper distance that felt like miles. When she tried to catch his eye during a particularly off-key performance, hoping to share the moment of humor as they had before, he stared straight ahead as if carved from marble. Annette felt the loss like a physical wound. She had pushed too hard, demanded too much, and now he was retreating behind walls she could not scale. The irony was not lost on her. She had agreed to a false courtship to avoid one loveless arrangement, only to fall desperately in love with a man determined to keep her at arm's length. On Tuesday afternoon, when Herbert arrived for his scheduled visit, Annette was prepared to match his formality with her own. She would not beg for scraps of affection from a man who had made his boundaries clear. She had her pride, even if her heart was breaking. But her mother had other plans. Mrs. Carter intercepted them in the entrance hall with unusual firmness. "Duke Ravenshire, might I have a word?" "Alone?" Herbert looked startled but nodded. "Of course, Mrs. Carter." Annette watched her mother lead Herbert into the small parlor, the door closing firmly behind them. She stood in the hallway, torn between curiosity and dread, wondering what her mother could possibly be saying. Inside the parlor, Eleanor Carter faced the Duke with the steel spine of a woman who had navigated society's treacherous waters for decades. She gestured to a chair, but remained standing herself, a subtle power play that did not escape Herbert's notice. "I will be direct, Your Grace, since directness seems to be your preferred mode of communication. You are hurting my daughter." Herbert's composure cracked slightly. "Mrs. Carter, I assure you I have behaved with complete propriety." "Oh, propriety." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "I am not speaking of your behavior in public. I am speaking of the way you look at her when you think no one is watching, the way your voice changes when you say her name, and then the way you pull back as if proximity to happiness might burn you." Herbert stood, clearly uncomfortable with the confrontation. "Our arrangement is temporary. Miss Carter understands this." "Does she? Or does she understand that you are a man so terrified of living that you would rather exist in shadows than risk feeling the sun again?" Eleanor's voice softened. "I know loss, Your Grace. I lost 2 children before Annette was born. I understand the fear that comes with loving something so precious it could destroy you if taken away." Herbert's jaw tightened. "Then you understand why I cannot... I understand why you are afraid. That does not make it wise." Eleanor moved closer, her expression compassionate but unyielding. "My daughter is falling in love with you, perhaps has already fallen, and unless I am very much mistaken, you feel the same. So the question is not whether you can love again, but whether you have the courage to try." The words hit Herbert like physical blows. He sank back into the chair, suddenly exhausted. "I do not know if I do." "Then you must decide quickly." Eleanor's tone turned urgent. "Because Annette is running out of time in ways you do not understand, and if you truly care for her, you will either give her reason to hope or set her free to find it elsewhere." "What do you mean, running out of time?" But Eleanor simply shook her head. "That is her story to tell if she chooses. I have said what I came to say." She moved toward the door, then paused. "One more thing, Your Grace. You speak of your wife with such devotion, and that is admirable. But ask yourself this: would she want you to spend the rest of your life as a monument to her memory? Or would she want you to live? She left him alone with that question burning in his mind. That evening, Herbert returned to his London townhouse and did something he had not done in years. He went to the locked drawer in his study and removed the miniature portrait of Catherine, his late wife. She stared back at him with gentle eyes and a soft smile, forever young, forever lost. He spoke aloud to the painted face, feeling foolish but unable to stop himself. I met someone, a woman who makes me laugh, who challenges me, who sees past the title and the grief to something I thought had died with you. And I am terrified, Catherine, terrified that if I let myself love her, fate will take her too. The portrait offered no answers, only the eternal silence of the dead. But in Herbert's memory, Catherine's voice spoke with the kindness he had loved. You cannot live in fear of loss, my darling. That is not living at all. That is merely existing, and you were meant for so much more. Herbert set down the portrait with shaking hands and buried his face in his palms. Mrs. Carter was right. Annette's mother was right. He was choosing half a life, and in doing so he was wasting the only life he had. Across the city, Annette sat with her own mother in the drawing room, finally unburdening herself of secrets too heavy to carry alone. She spoke of her love for Herbert, of the arrangement that was never meant to involve her heart, of the fear that consumed her with each passing day. And then, with tears streaming down her face, she told her mother about Theodore Harrow, about the contract her father had signed, about the deadline that loomed just 2 weeks away. Eleanor Carter listened in horrified silence. When Annette finished, her mother pulled her close, stroking her hair as she had when Annette was a child. Oh, my darling girl, why did you not tell me sooner? I thought I could manage it. I thought if Herbert and I appeared to be courting, Harrow would withdraw his claim. But Herbert has made it clear our arrangement ends after the new year and father's debt remains. Annette's voice broke. I do not know what to do, Mama. I cannot marry Harrow, but I cannot force Herbert to want me either. Eleanor was quiet for a long moment, her hand moving in soothing circles on Annette's back. Love always involves risk, she said finally. You cannot control what Herbert feels or what he chooses, but you can control whether you face this with honesty or continue hiding in fear. Tell him the truth about Harrow. Tell him what you stand to lose, and then let him make his choice with full knowledge. And if he chooses to walk away, then at least you will know you were brave enough to be honest. That is worth something, even in heartbreak. Annette cried herself to sleep that night, her pillow damp with tears, her mind spinning with impossible decisions. In 11 days, Christmas would arrive. In 11 days, her father's debt would come due. And somewhere in the darkness of London, Herbert lay awake wrestling with his own demons, trying to find courage he was not sure he possessed. Neither of them knew that fate was about to force their hand in ways they could never have anticipated. The time for careful distance and calculated arrangements was ending. What came next would require something far more dangerous than either had planned. It would require the truth. Christmas Eve arrived with heavy snow blanketing London in hushed white. The city had transformed into something from a fairy tale, all soft edges and muffled sounds, as if the world itself held its breath in anticipation. Inside the Carter residence, a fire crackled in the drawing room hearth, casting dancing shadows on the walls, while the family prepared for midnight services at the cathedral. Annette stood by the window, watching snowflakes drift past the glass, her reflection ghostly and uncertain. Tomorrow was Christmas. Tomorrow, her father's debt to Theodore Harrow would come due unless a miracle occurred. She had not seen Herbert in 3 days, not since their last strained visit, where he had maintained that terrible politeness that hurt more than anger ever could. She had resigned herself to her fate. Tomorrow, she would tell her father she could not marry Harrow regardless of the consequences. They would lose everything, but she would rather face poverty with dignity than spend her life in the grip of a cruel man. Some prices were simply too high to pay. The knock at the door startled her from her thoughts. Raised voices in the entrance hall, her mother's surprised exclamation. And then the butler appeared in the doorway, his expression caught between scandal and excitement. Miss Carter, the Duke of Ravenshire requests an immediate audience with you. He says it cannot wait. Annette's heart lurched against her ribs. She smoothed her skirts with trembling hands. nodded permission and watched Herbert stride into the room as if walking into battle. His greatcoat was dusted with snow, his dark hair disheveled, his eyes burning with an intensity that stole her breath. The butler discreetly withdrew, leaving the door appropriately ajar. Through the gap, Annette could see her parents hovering in the hall, pretending not to listen while clearly hanging on every word. "Your Grace," Annette managed, her voice steadier than she felt. "This is unexpected." Herbert moved to stand before the fireplace, his back to the flames, his hands clenched at his sides. "I could not wait another moment. These past 3 days have been torture. I have paced my study until the carpet is worn thin, arguing with myself with the memory of my wife, with every rational thought that tells me to protect myself." Annette waited, afraid to speak, afraid to hope. "Your mother came to see me," Herbert continued. "She said things that have haunted me, about courage and living rather than merely existing. And she was right." He took a step toward Annette, his expression raw with emotion. "I have been a coward, Annette. I have hidden behind grief for so long I forgot what it felt like to truly live. Until you." Her name on his lips, spoken with such tenderness, nearly undid her. Herbert crossed the remaining distance between them, stopping just close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the scent of snow and sandalwood that clung to his coat. "You made me laugh again. You challenged me, infuriated me, made me feel things I swore I would never feel again. And it terrified me." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "It still terrifies me. The thought of losing you, of opening my heart only to have it destroyed again." "Then why are you here?" Annette whispered. "Because the thought of living without you terrifies me more." Herbert reached up and cradled her face between his palms, his thumbs tracing the line of her cheekbones with infinite gentleness. "Because I realized that you were right. I'm already losing you when our arrangement ends. The pain is inevitable. The only choice is whether I face it with the memory of having truly loved you, or with the regret of being too afraid to try." Tears spilled down Annette's cheeks. "Herbert, Let me finish, please." His eyes searched hers with desperate intensity. "I love you, Annette Carter. I love your intelligence, your courage, your fierce heart. I love the way you laugh at terrible theater and argue about philosophy, and look at me as if I am more than my grief. I love you, and I am done pretending otherwise." The confession hung in the air between them, precious and terrifying. Annette reached up and covered his hands with hers, holding them against her face. "I love you too. I have loved you almost from the beginning, though I tried desperately not to." Herbert's breath came out in a shuddering exhale. "Then, marry me. Not as part of our arrangement, not to satisfy society or protect your reputation. Marry me because you want to spend your life beside a difficult, damaged man who will love you with everything he has left." Annette's tears came faster now, joy and relief and terror mixing together. "Yes, yes, Herbert, I will marry you." He pulled her against him then, his arms wrapping around her with fierce possession. His mouth found hers in a kiss that started gentle and quickly deepened into something desperate and consuming. Annette melted into him, her hands fisting in his coat, her body pressed against the hard length of him as 4 years of denial and 3 months of restrained desire finally broke free. Herbert's hands moved over her back, her waist, learning the shape of her through layers of fabric. His lips traced a path from her mouth to her jaw, to the sensitive spot below her ear that made her gasp. "Annette." His voice was ragged against her skin. "Tell me to stop. Tell me this is too fast." But Annette had spent too long being careful, being proper, denying what her heart demanded. "Do not stop," she whispered. "Do not ever stop." From the hallway came the sound of her mother clearing her throat meaningfully, followed by her father's gruff voice, suggesting they give the couple more privacy but not too much. A door closed, shutting them into relative solitude, though still observed by propriety's watchful eye. Herbert pulled back just enough to look at her, his pupils blown wide with desire, his breathing heavy. "We should wait until after we are married." "We should," Annette agreed. But her hands were already working at the buttons of his waistcoat, her fingers trembling with need and nerves and love too fierce to contain. Herbert caught her hands, stilled them. His expression was torn between honor and want. "Annette, if we do this now, then we do this now," she finished firmly. "I am choosing you, Herbert. I am choosing this moment, this feeling, this love. And I do not want to wait another second to show you how completely you have claimed my heart." Something in him surrendered. His hands cupped her face again, and he kissed her with a reverence that made her knees weak. They moved together toward the settee, a tangle of careful touches and whispered endearments. Buttons were undone with shaking fingers. Fabric slipped aside to reveal skin that had never been touched this way before. Herbert's hands explored her shoulders, her collarbones, the curve of her waist, with a gentleness that spoke of worship rather than conquest. Every touch was a question, every response an answer of trust and desire. They learned each other slowly, thoroughly, in the firelight and shadow, two wounded souls finding healing in the connection of bodies and hearts. When they finally came together, it was with a tenderness that brought tears to Annette's eyes. Herbert held her gaze, his own eyes suspiciously bright as they moved in ancient rhythm. This was not just physical union. This was the joining of two people who had found each other in darkness and chosen light. Afterward, they lay tangled together on the narrow settee, Herbert's coat spread over them for warmth and modesty. Annette rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, feeling his fingers trace lazy patterns on her shoulder. "I have something I must tell you," she whispered, suddenly terrified. The weight of her secret pressed down with crushing force. She could not marry him under false pretenses. He deserved the truth. Herbert pressed a kiss to her hair. "Whatever it is, we will face it together." And so Annette told him everything. About her father's debts, about Theodore Harrow, about the contract that demanded her marriage by Christmas Day or the family's financial destruction. She felt Herbert's body tense beneath her, heard his breathing change, but he did not pull away. When she finished, he was silent for a long moment. Then he said quietly, "Why did you not tell me sooner?" "I was afraid you would feel obligated, afraid you would think I had orchestrated our entire acquaintance to trap you into marriage." Herbert shifted so he could look at her face. "And instead, you were willing to sacrifice yourself to a monster rather than risk manipulating me." Annette nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Herbert's expression softened with something that looked like awe. "You foolish, courageous, impossibly noble woman." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her mouth. "I am marrying you tomorrow. Tomorrow is Christmas. I am aware." Herbert sat up, pulling her with him, already reaching for his scattered clothing with determined efficiency. "We will wake the Archbishop if necessary, but you will be my wife before sunset tomorrow, and Harrow can take his contract and burn it." Annette watched him dress, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "You are certain?" Herbert paused, turned to face her fully and took her hands in his. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are mine, Annette Carter, and I am yours, and nothing, not debt, nor contract, nor fear, nor death itself, will take you from me." She believed him. As the bells of London began tolling the arrival of Christmas, two people who had been broken by loss and betrayal held each other in the firelight and discovered that sometimes healing comes when you least expect it, and sometimes love is worth every risk. Christmas morning dawned cold and bright, the snow-covered city sparkling under pale winter sun. Annette woke in her own bed with the memory of the previous night burning through her like fever, Herbert's hands on her skin, his voice whispering her name, the promise he had made to marry her before sunset. She pressed her fingers to her lips, still swollen from his kisses, and felt equal parts joy and terror. He knew everything now. The debt, the contract, the desperate timeline that had driven her to accept his original proposal, and he had not fled. Instead, he had declared his intention to marry her immediately, to stand between her and Theodore Harrow like a wall of steel and aristocratic privilege. But morning brought clarity that passion had obscured. What if Herbert regretted his promise in daylight? What if he realized he had been manipulated by circumstance despite her intentions? What if... A commotion downstairs interrupted her spiraling thoughts, raised voices, her father's angry tone, and then a knock at her bedroom door. "Miss Annette." The maid's voice was urgent. "Your father requests your presence immediately. There is a gentleman here to see you." Annette's stomach dropped. She dressed hastily, her fingers fumbling with buttons, and descended the stairs with her heart in her throat. In the drawing room, she found her father standing rigid with fury, her mother pale with concern, and Theodore Harrow himself seated comfortably in Herbert's usual chair. Harrow was exactly as she remembered from their one brief meeting months ago. 50s, well-dressed but somehow oily, with cold eyes that assessed her like merchandise. He smiled when she entered, showing too many teeth. "Miss Carter, Merry Christmas. I thought it time we became better acquainted, given that our wedding will take place within the month." Annette forced herself to remain calm. "Mr. Harrow, I'm afraid there has been a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding at all." Harrow pulled a document from his coat. "I have your father's signature on a binding agreement. Unless you are formally betrothed as of today, you become my intended bride." He glanced around the room with theatrical confusion. "I see no fiancé present." Before Annette could respond, the butler appeared at the door, his expression caught between shock and something like relief. "Forgive the interruption, but the Duke of Ravenshire has arrived. He says it is urgent." Herbert strode into the room as if he owned it, snow still clinging to his greatcoat, his expression thunderous. His gaze swept over the scene, taking in Harrow's presence, Annette's pale face, her father's fury. Something dangerous flickered in his dark eyes. Harrow. The single word carried volumes of contempt. Herbert removed his gloves slowly, deliberately. "I was not aware vermin were welcome in this household." Harrow stood, puffing himself up with false confidence. "Duke Ravenshire? How unexpected. Though I suppose you have come to pay your respects before Miss Carter becomes my wife." Herbert's laugh was cold enough to frost the windows. "Your wife?" He crossed to stand beside Annette, his hand finding hers and holding tight. "I am afraid that is impossible, as Miss Carter is to become my wife. Today." The room erupted. Her father's expression transformed from fury to shock to calculation. Her mother pressed a hand to her chest, eyes bright with tears. Harrow's face turned an alarming shade of purple. "That is impossible," Harrow sputtered. "The agreement is binding." "Unless she is formally betrothed." "She is." Herbert drew a small velvet box from his pocket and opened it to reveal a ring set with sapphires and diamonds. "I proposed last night. She accepted. And we will be married by special license before sunset." He slid the ring onto Annette's finger with possessive certainty. "Any questions?" Harrow turned to Edmund Carter with desperate anger. "You signed a contract. If you break it, I will ruin you completely. Every debt called in, every asset seized. You will die in debtor's prison." Herbert's voice cut through the room like a blade. "No, he will not, because I am purchasing his debts, all of them." He produced another document, this one thick with legal text and official seals. "As of this morning, Mr. Carter owes you nothing. Your contract is void." The silence that followed was absolute. Annette stared at Herbert, unable to process what he had just done. He had not simply offered to marry her. He had systematically dismantled every weapon Harrow held, had bought her father's freedom along with her own. "You cannot do this," Harrow said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "I already have." Herbert's expression was carved from ice. "And if you trouble this family again in any capacity, I will ensure that every door in London society closes to you permanently. I have the influence and the inclination to destroy you utterly. Do we understand each other?" Harrow looked between Herbert's implacable face and the legal documents that had just stripped him of his prize. For a moment, Annette thought he might try to fight. Then something in him crumpled. He snatched his hat and stormed from the room without another word. The moment he was gone, Annette's knees buckled. Herbert caught her, holding her against his chest as she shook with reaction. "You bought my father's debts," she whispered. "Herbert, that is a fortune." It is money. Herbert tipped her face up to his. You are priceless, there is no comparison. Edmund Carter cleared his throat roughly. Your Grace, I do not know what to say. This generosity is not generosity, sir. Herbert's tone was firm but not unkind. It is investment in my future happiness. Your daughter has agreed to be my wife, and I will not have her burdened by debts that are not her own. He turned back to Annette. Now we have an archbishop waiting and approximately 8 hours of daylight remaining. Shall we? But as they prepared to leave for the hastily arranged ceremony, another unexpected visitor arrived. Charles Miller stood in the entrance hall, hat in hand, looking thoroughly miserable in the falling snow. Miss Carter. Charles's voice was rough with emotion. Might I speak with you? Just for a moment. Herbert's jaw tightened, but Annette touched his arm gently. Please, let me hear what he has to say. They stepped into the small parlor, Charles maintaining a respectful distance. He looked older than when she had last seen him, careworn and uncertain. I heard about your engagement. The whole city is talking about it. Charles twisted his hat in his hands. I wanted to congratulate you and to apologize for everything. Annette waited, saying nothing. I was a coward. Charles met her eyes, his own suspiciously bright. My family pushed for the match with Lydia because of her dowry. I convinced myself it was love, because that was easier than admitting I was choosing money over honor. Over you. He swallowed hard. You deserved better than I gave you. You always deserved better. The apology sat between them, imperfect but genuine. Annette felt the last threads of anger and hurt begin to loosen. I forgive you, Charles, not because what you did was acceptable, but because I refuse to carry that pain into my future. I am choosing happiness, I am choosing Herbert, and I am choosing to let go of what cannot be changed. Charles nodded, blinking rapidly. He is a good man, the Duke. He will treasure you as I did not. He already does. After Charles left, Annette returned to Herbert's side. He searched her face with concern. Are you well? I am. She took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I needed to hear that apology, to know that he regretted his choices. But it changed nothing. My heart belongs to you, Herbert, completely. Only you. Herbert pulled her close, pressing his forehead to hers. Then let us make it official before the universe conspires to separate us again. As they rode through the snowy streets toward the cathedral, Annette looked at the man beside her and felt something settle deep in her chest. The fear that had driven her for months had finally released its grip. Harrow was vanquished. Her father's debts were paid. Charles had apologized and been forgiven, and Herbert, the severe, grief-stricken duke who had agreed to a false courtship, sat holding her hand as if it were made of something precious. What had begun in desperation had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted. Not an arrangement, not a convenience, but a love fierce enough to overcome every obstacle. They were not out of the woods yet. There would be gossip about the hasty marriage, questions about propriety and motivation, complications she could not yet foresee. But as Herbert's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, Annette knew with absolute certainty that they would face whatever came next together. And that made all the difference. The cathedral bells rang out across London as Herbert's carriage pulled to a stop before the ancient stone steps. Snow continued to fall in soft, silent drifts, transforming the city into something ethereal and otherworldly. Inside the carriage, Annette smoothed her dress with trembling hands. It was not a wedding gown, just her best day dress in pale blue silk, but Herbert had looked at her as if she wore diamonds and lace. This is madness, she whispered, though she was smiling. We are about to be married by special license on Christmas Day with barely any witnesses. Society will be scandalized. Herbert lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. Let them be scandalized. I have spent 4 years caring what society thinks, letting their expectations dictate my life. I am done with that. He met her eyes with fierce determination. I choose you, Annette. Scandal be damned. The ceremony itself was brief and intimate. Her parents stood as witnesses, along with Herbert's cousin Edward, who had been roused from his Christmas dinner with barely an explanation. The Archbishop, somewhat bewildered by the urgency but swayed by Herbert's title and generous donation, performed the service with appropriate solemnity. When Herbert repeated his vows, his voice never wavered. I, Herbert Langford, take thee, Annette Carter, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part. The words that had once terrified him now felt like a promise he was desperate to keep. Annette's own vows were spoken through tears of joy, her voice breaking on the word cherish. When the Archbishop pronounced them man and wife, Herbert cupped Annette's face between his palms and kissed her with a tenderness that made her mother weep openly. The new Duchess of Ravensshire leaned into her husband's embrace and felt the last remnants of fear dissolve into certainty. They were married. She was safe. They were together. But their day was far from finished. That evening, despite the hasty nature of their wedding, Herbert insisted they attend the annual Christmas ball at his cousin's estate. Edward had been planning the event for months, and half of London society would be present. To miss it would only fuel more gossip. Are you certain? Annette asked as they prepared to leave. We could remain here, start our married life in privacy. Herbert adjusted his cravat in the mirror, his expression thoughtful. I want to walk into that ballroom with you on my arm as my wife. I want everyone who whispered about you, who pitied you, who watched your humiliation with entertainment, to see that you are a duchess now, that you are cherished, that you won. The ball was already in full swing when they arrived. The butler announced them with clear, ringing tones that cut through the music and conversation like a knife. The Duke and Duchess of Ravensshire. The ballroom fell silent. Every head turned, every eye fixed on them with varying degrees of shock, curiosity, and outrage. Annette felt her courage waver, but Herbert's hand tightened on hers, steadying her. They descended the grand staircase together, and the crowd parted before them like water. Annette could hear the whispers starting already, spreading through the room like wildfire. Married? Today? On Christmas? How scandalous! How improper! How utterly unprecedented! Lady Ashworth rushed forward, torn between fascination and affront. Your Grace, Duchess Ravensshire, we had no idea there was to be a wedding. Such haste is most unusual. Herbert's expression remained pleasant, but his tone held steel. When one knows one's heart, Lady Ashworth, delay serves no purpose. I am fortunate that my wife agreed to marry me with such expedition. The word wife sent another ripple through the crowd. Annette straightened her spine and met the curious stares with calm dignity. She was not the desperate, humiliated woman they had pitied 3 months ago. She was a duchess, beloved and chosen. As if summoned by the spectacle, Theodore Harrow appeared at the edge of the crowd. His presence cast a shadow over the festivities, his expression twisted with barely concealed rage. He pushed through the guests with aggressive determination, clearly intent on confrontation. Herbert moved instantly, placing himself between Harrow and Annette. His entire demeanor transformed from polite aristocrat to something far more dangerous. I warned you, Harrow. You are not welcome here. Harrow's face flushed an ugly red. You think you can steal what belongs to me? Purchase your way out of a binding contract. I will see you both ruined for this. Nothing belonged to you. Herbert's voice dropped lower, more menacing. And if you value what remains of your reputation, you will leave this place immediately and never speak my wife's name again. The threat hung in the air, unmistakable and absolute. Edward moved to Herbert's side, flanked by several other gentlemen whose expressions made clear they would support the Duke without question. Harrow looked around the ballroom, saw no allies, only cold faces and turned backs. With a final look of impotent fury, he stalked from the room. The silence that followed his departure was broken by Edward raising his glass. To my cousin Herbert and his bride, may they know every happiness. The toast was echoed around the room, some with genuine warmth, others with grudging respect. The music resumed. Gradually, conversation returned to normal levels, though Annette knew they would be the primary topic of discussion for weeks to come. Herbert led her to the center of the ballroom. The orchestra began a waltz, and he pulled her into his arms with possessive certainty. As they moved across the floor, he leaned close to whisper in her ear, "I need to tell you something. Something I should have said months ago." Annette looked up at him, seeing vulnerability in those dark eyes. "What is it?" "When I lost Catherine and our son, I believed that part of my life was over, that I would never love again, never feel joy, never want to wake up in the morning." His voice roughened with emotion. "But you changed everything. You made me laugh. You made me angry. You made me feel alive again, and I was terrified because feeling alive meant risking pain." "I know." Annette touched his face gently. "You told me as much. But what I did not say, what I could not admit even to myself, was that the pain of losing you would be bearable because at least I would have known you. At least I would have loved you." His eyes shone suspiciously bright. "You gave me back my life, Annette, and I will spend every day of our marriage trying to deserve that gift." Tears spilled down Annette's cheeks. "You already deserve it. You saw me when I was invisible. You valued me when I felt worthless. You chose me when I expected nothing." They danced in silence for a moment, lost in each other despite the watching crowd. Then Herbert smiled, a genuine expression of pure happiness that transformed his entire face. "So what do we do now, Duchess?" Annette smiled back through her tears. "Now we live, we love, we face whatever comes together. Together." Herbert pressed his forehead to hers, not caring who saw, not caring what anyone thought. "I like the sound of that." As the waltz ended and applause rippled through the ballroom, Annette looked around at the faces watching them. Some showed envy, some showed disapproval, but many showed something softer, understanding perhaps, or even hope. Here was proof that broken hearts could heal, that love could return after loss, that courage could transform desperation into triumph. Edmund Carter stood with his wife near the refreshments, his expression no longer heavy with debt and shame, but lightened by relief and gratitude. He had almost sacrificed his daughter to save himself, but Herbert's intervention had freed them both. Across the room, Annette caught a glimpse of Charles and Lydia standing together. Charles met her eyes briefly, nodded with what looked like genuine happiness for her, then turned his attention back to his own wife. That chapter was closed, forgiven, if not forgotten. Herbert guided Annette toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, where they could stand together without performance. He kept her hand in his thumb tracing circles on her palm in a gesture that had become familiar and beloved. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything. For saving me from Harrow. For choosing me despite your fears. For giving me a future I never dared to imagine." Herbert shook his head. "You saved yourself, Annette. You faced scandal with dignity. You protected your family with courage. You agreed to a false arrangement, not knowing it would become real. All I did was recognize what you are worth and refuse to let you go." She stood on her toes and kissed him softly, sweetly, in full view of London society. And when she pulled back, Herbert was smiling again, that rare and precious smile that belonged only to her. As the clock chimed midnight and Christmas gave way to the first hours of their marriage, Herbert and Annette stood together in that glittering ballroom and knew with absolute certainty that what had begun in desperation and fear had transformed into something neither of them could have predicted. Not an arrangement, not a rescue, but a partnership built on honesty, respect, and a love fierce enough to overcome every obstacle. And that, they both understood, was only the beginning. 3 years had passed since that Christmas wedding, and London had found new scandals to occupy its collective attention. The hasty marriage of the Duke of Ravenshire to a merchant's daughter had become simply another love story, told and retold until the edges smoothed into something resembling fairy tale. But for Herbert and Annette, the reality was far richer than any story. They had married again in June, a proper ceremony with all the pomp and circumstance that society demanded. Annette wore ivory silk and carried roses from the Ravenshire gardens. Herbert stood at the altar and wept openly when she appeared, caring nothing for masculine stoicism or aristocratic reserve. Their second wedding was for the world. Their first had been for themselves. After the festivities ended, they had travelled north to Ravenshire Estate, and Annette had fallen completely in love with the harsh, beautiful landscape Herbert called home. The wind that howled across the moors, the dramatic cliffs dropping to angry seas, the stone castle that stood defiant against every storm. It was wild and unforgiving and absolutely perfect. She had thrown herself into learning estate management, shocking the steward by actually wanting to understand crop rotation and tenant welfare. Herbert had given her free rein, delighted by her intelligence and passion. Together, they had implemented reforms that improved conditions for their workers while increasing productivity. The tenants, initially suspicious of a London lady, had come to respect and even love their duchess. Annette had also pursued her own education with Herbert's complete support. He had hired tutors in languages and history, had opened his extensive library to her complete access, and had engaged in passionate debates that lasted late into the night. She had begun writing essays on social reform under a masculine pseudonym, and several had been published in respected journals. Herbert kept everyone in his desk drawer, reading them with undisguised pride. Their marriage was not perfect. They argued fiercely about everything from politics to which horse to purchase. Herbert still struggled with dark moods when grief ambushed him unexpectedly. Annette sometimes woke from nightmares about Theodore Harrow, even though the man had left England entirely, last heard to have relocated to America. But they had learned to weather these storms together. Herbert no longer retreated into isolated silence when pain struck. Annette no longer hid her fears behind practiced smiles. They had built something stronger than romance. They had built partnership. And then, 14 months after their wedding, Annette had discovered she was with child. Herbert's reaction had been immediate terror. The memory of losing Catherine in childbirth haunted him with visceral intensity. He had paced their bedroom for hours, his face pale, his hands shaking. "I cannot lose you." His voice had broken. "Annette, I cannot survive losing you." She had taken his face between her hands, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Then we must choose not to live in fear of what might happen. We must choose to trust that we will face whatever comes together. Are we not stronger than fear, Herbert?" He had held her that night as if she might disappear, and in the morning he had made a decision. They would hire the best physicians money could buy. They would spare no expense on her care. And he would be present for every step of this journey, not hiding from fear but confronting it with courage. The pregnancy had been difficult. Annette suffered terrible sickness in the early months, then swelling and fatigue toward the end. Herbert had been with her through all of it, reading to her when she could not sleep, holding her hair when she was ill, massaging her aching feet with his own hands, despite the scandalized gasps of servants. The labor had lasted 18 hours. Herbert had refused to leave the room, sitting beside her bed holding her hand, his face carved with fear and determination. When their son finally arrived, screaming with healthy fury, Herbert had wept harder than Annette. They named him William, after Herbert's father. The baby had his mother's blue eyes and his father's dark hair, and Herbert held him with the careful awe of a man given a second chance at fatherhood. Watching Herbert with their son had broken and healed Annette's heart simultaneously. He was gentle, attentive, openly affectionate in ways that shocked visiting nobility. He sang to William, walked the floors with him at night, changed his nappies without complaint. The severe duke who had hidden behind grief for years had transformed into a father who laughed easily and loved without reservation. Now, on another Christmas Eve, they were back in London for the winter season. Annette stood in the drawing room of their townhouse, watching snow fall past the window just as she had 3 years ago. But everything had changed. William toddled across the floor, now 2 years old and full of mischief. Herbert chased him with exaggerated slowness, letting the boy escape with squeals of delight. In Annette's arms, their second child, Catherine, slept peacefully. Born just 6 months ago, she had been named for Herbert's first wife with Annette's complete blessing. The pregnancy with Catherine had been easier. Herbert had still worried, but without the paralyzing fear that had marked William's arrival. They had learned to trust, to hope, to believe that happiness could exist without constant dread of its loss. Annette watched her husband collapse dramatically on the carpet, allowing William to climb over him like a conquered fortress, and felt her heart overflow with love. This man who had been so broken, so convinced he could never feel joy again, was now the center of a chaotic, joyful family. Herbert caught her watching and smiled, that full, genuine smile that still took her breath away. "What are you thinking?" "That I am grateful. For everything. For that night on the terrace when we first met. For the arrangement that brought us together. For every moment since." Herbert sat up, holding William secure in his lap. I was thinking the same. He met her eyes across the room. "Do you remember what you said to me that night? About fury and terror and pretending? That it only makes the weight heavier," Annette finished. "You were right." Herbert's voice grew thick with emotion. "Loving you. Letting myself be vulnerable again. It was terrifying. But it was also the only thing that could save me. You saved me, Annette." She crossed the room and settled beside him, their family complete and together. "You saved yourself, Herbert. You chose courage over fear. You chose to live rather than merely exist." William squirmed free and toddled toward his toys. Herbert reached over and touched Catherine's sleeping face with infinite gentleness, then took Annette's hand. "We saved each other," he said firmly. "That is the truth of it." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children, feeling the warmth of the fire and each other's presence. Outside, London prepared for Christmas celebrations. Inside, a family that had been forged from desperation and fear now thrived on love and trust. Later that evening, they attended another winter ball, much like the one where everything had begun. They walked through the same ballroom where Herbert had first held Annette in his arms for a waltz. But now she wore his ring, his name, and carried his children. Now there was no pretense, no performance, no careful arrangement. As they danced, Herbert pulled her close and whispered, "You know what today is, Christmas Eve. 3 years since you proposed our arrangement. 3 years since I was fool enough to think I could spend time with you and not fall completely in love." Herbert kissed her forehead. "Best mistake I ever made." Annette laughed, the sound drawing smiles from dancers nearby. "It was no mistake. It was fate. Do you believe in fate now? I believe in choice. I believe we chose each other again and again despite every obstacle. That is more powerful than fate." The music swelled around them. Herbert held her closer, beyond what was strictly proper, exactly as he had that first night. But now no one whispered. Now they simply smiled, recognizing a couple genuinely in love. As the evening drew to a close and they prepared to return home to their children, Herbert paused on the terrace where they had first met. Snow fell softly around them, just as it had 3 years ago. "I love you, Annette Langford, more than I thought it possible to love anyone." Annette wrapped her arms around her husband and kissed him deeply, tasting snowflakes and promise. "I love you too. Always." They stood together in the falling snow, two people who had been broken by loss and betrayal, but had found the courage to trust again. What had begun as desperate need had transformed into something neither could have imagined. Not just love, but healing. Not just marriage, but partnership. Not just survival, but a life worth living. And as the bells of London chimed midnight, marking the arrival of another Christmas, Herbert and Annette walked into their future hand in hand, knowing that whatever challenges awaited, they would face them together. Because sometimes, the greatest love stories begin not with perfection, but with two wounded people choosing to be brave enough to try again. Love, Annette discovered, was not the absence of fear, but the courage to choose connection despite it. What began in desperation ended in grace. What started as performance became the most authentic love either had known. A reminder that sometimes our greatest fears lead us exactly where we need to be. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more stories of hope and second chances. I would love to know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Comment below and share this journey with me. Thank you for being here, and may you find the courage to choose love again and again.